Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're viewing from. Welcome to my podcast. Today I'm answering two questions. The first one is, do we move on or do we move forward with loss? And the other question is, when does one start healing? So I'll get straight to it. Just a disclaimer, everything that I say is not professional, but this is based on experiences. So please take note that what I speak about is from experience and not from a professional perspective. All right, so the first question, do people move on when they lose someone? And I want to say people do not move on, but they move forward with loss. It's not something that you can forget, because that's losing a human being. So you can't move on from that. But what you do is you begin to accept that that person is no longer there, and then you start moving forward. So you move forward with loss, but not moving on. When you're moving on, it simply means that you can forget about that experience, and that's not the case with grief or with loss. Because a human being existed in that space, so you cannot forget them. So that's why you can't move on from loss. There are people that could be close to you that you may not have interacted with on a daily basis. Maybe that you can move on from. For example, there are people that we idolize, our role models, and people that are not very close to us. Maybe you can move on from that. But when it's a loss of somebody that is very close to you, you cannot move on from that. But what you do is you just keep moving forward. One step at a time, a day at a time, until you're in a space where you can think of their memory and smile because they made your life special at some point. So that's my answer to that first question. And then the second question I'm going to answer is, when does one start healing from the loss of a loved one? That's a very difficult question because you cannot attach a time frame to it. But what I can safely say is, when you start accepting that that person is not coming back, then the healing process can begin. It may not be in a year, it may be in a year, it may be in months, and for some it may be quicker than that. But the healing process is exactly that, a process. So it can happen sooner than your body can comprehend or your mind can comprehend the change that has happened to you. So there are a lot of situations that you go through after losing someone. Sometimes you're bargaining with God that, why did you allow this person to leave? Or why was it not so and so? Or why was it not me, the one that died? So when you're still at that stage, you are not going to heal because you have not yet accepted what has happened. Instead, you're trying to bargain, trying to find a way out of that situation. In my book, I talk about the grief cycle, that there are different stages that you go through and not in a progressive order. It can just come, maybe you're at number 1, the following day at 5. But healing will eventually happen. So what happens is, when you can talk about that person and not shed so many tears, then maybe you're beginning to accept what has happened, and then the healing process can begin. But even when you feel you are healed, there are some triggers that can just come, and you find yourself weeping, rolling on the floor, and doing everything else to express the emotions that you're feeling at that time. It may not necessarily mean that you have not accepted your loss, but it may say that you are just going through the motions on that particular day. So healing is a process. And sometimes, just like maybe a drug situation where people can relapse, that also happens with grief. You may be thinking that I finally healed from it, but something just triggers it and you go back to where you started. So healing will only happen when you have accepted that this person is no longer a part of your life. And when you've also accepted that in their space or in their place, you are doing other things to take care of that emotional part of that loss. So that's only when healing can begin to take place. Thank you so much. Till next time.